Time for the Morning Watch with host Stokely Marshall. The Morning Watch today is brought to you by Home and Things.
Listeners to Love 101 FM are advised that the views and opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of Love 101 FM.
Hello and welcome to the Morning Watch on Love 101 FM. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. One moment while the results are marked here. I apologize to all listeners for this issue, which we are resolving in a moment.
Alrighty, not sure what the issue is. Well, in the first watch this morning, how rarely is domestic violence against men? In the second watch, why do women keep going back to the men who abuse them? And this morning we're asking, for what reasons would you go back to the person who abuses you? This morning's I quote, when purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. The Morning Watch. We'll be back after this.
Honor thy mother and thy father. You mean even when they have abused and abandoned me? Even when they don't love me? How do you honor parents who mistreat and ignore you? Join Pastor Hero Steve Blair and guests Pastor Dean Smith and Minister Valentine Rodney as they discuss part 2 of the topic, Thou Shalt Honor. On The Rock, Tuesday, June 8 at 10 a.m. right here on Love 101 FM, the family station.
I just want to sleep, but it's cold won't let me.
When cold symptoms rob you of your sleep, switch back to a good night with Painol. Painol, the cost-effective cough and cold reliever that helps you get a good night's sleep. Switch back with Painol, cough and cold from Lascom Pharmaceuticals.
49 years later and still going strong. Under the Law helps you to know your rights and how the laws of Jamaica can help you defend those rights. The program is brought to you on Tuesdays by the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, providing opportunity, stability, and social protection. Under the Law, Tuesdays at 6:20 a.m., 2:55, 6:45, and 9:10 p.m. on Love 101 FM.
Everybody have rights. Man, woman, and child, whether you're big or small. Everybody have rights. Look up for one another, we are sister and brother. Everybody have rights. Nobody no fi intimidate you. Nobody no fi discriminate you. As human being, respect you. Learn your rights, learn to protect you. Everybody have rights. Man, woman, and child, whether you're big or small. Everybody have rights.
Brought to you by the National Family Planning Board and the Office of the Public Defender.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. I do apologize to the listeners for that. We had earlier on technical challenges in relation to the equipment on my end. And getting right into the main watch, how real is domestic violence against men? And, oftentimes we are very much conscious and aware of the horrendous incidents of domestic violence against women. And, of course, that is completely and totally abhorrent. There are sometimes instances of domestic violence against men, and those cases are, as it were, not spoken of very much. So men are abused by their domestic partners, and possibly a lot more than you think. But what does this abuse look like, and how real is it, really? Can it really be called abuse, or are these men just, as it were, maybe what they're calling abuse isn't abuse, or maybe it is abuse, but of a different sort? We have online this morning to discuss this very sensitive and oftentimes embarrassing issue for some men. Dr. Gillian Mason, community psychologist, lecturer in the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work at the University of West Indies, Mona, as well as Mr. Owen Blacker Ellis, who is a gender justice activist. And of course, many of us know him as someone who has, as it were, entertained us through comedy. Good morning, Dr. Mason, and good morning, Mr. Ellis.
A very good morning to you, and thank you for having me.
Indeed. Dr. Mason? I'm not sure what has happened in relation to Dr. Mason. We hope to have her online to get a little bit of the perspective in terms of what happens in the minds of persons who engage in this kind of activity. Mr. Ellis, yes. In terms of opening, you would have likely heard what I said in relation to clearly the cases in relation to domestic violence, for the most part, from what we see, is clearly in relation to violence against women, physical violence, etc.
Right.
However, you do have those cases where men are abused, and I was looking at some information published in the Gleaner, for example, over the years, and in the cases where a man is abused and he has the bravery to go to the police station to report it, unfortunately, other men who are police officers will actually ridicule the man and say to him, make fun of him, as it were.
Right.
In fact, it is the female police officers who might show a little more sympathy and will probably take his report seriously. Do you have any comments to make, sir, in relation to the incidences of domestic violence against men? The embarrassment and the shame that they might experience because a woman beat them, for example, whether it be their wife or their, whoever it is that they're in an intimate relationship with, maybe a common law wife or a visiting relationship with with a female. Any comments you want to make, sir? Because it seems to speak to our culture and how we look at these sorts of incidents, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And to answer the question raised in the title of this morning's conversation, is it real? It certainly is real. And we have enough anecdotal evidence to confirm that there are men who are beaten by their women. There are men who are abused by their intimate partners who are women. But the issue is, it is certainly real, but the issue is we're never going to be able to adequately address it. It is so badly unacknowledged. And for the same reason you alluded to, that men are ashamed when they try to. But first of all, our entire culture has socialized men into feeling that men aren't allowed to express any emotion beyond anger or perhaps extreme sadness. If your mother dead, they can bawl. But men have not been learned, men have not been taught, and men haven't learned how to express hurt, pain, loss, rejection, sadness, vulnerability. So it is difficult for the issue to be adequately addressed because men aren't allowed to complain. Men aren't allowed to say, boy, I'm having a problem. I mean, I certainly witnessed it in my growing up. I was raised by my aunt who beat her partner mercilessly, and to just beat man. She beat woman, she beat man, she beat fitness, she beat her body, she fight man, she fight teacher, she fight police. So she was an angry woman. who was frustrated and who obviously had issued, but she was a violent person. And there are women who are violent like that, who abuse men. But how can we encourage men and empower men to accept and admit their vulnerability and seek help? That's a big question, really.
Very interesting, Mr. Ellis. I almost said that. Very interesting, Blacker, because that is how I'm accustomed to refer to you.
You can call me Blacker, it's quite okay.
Very interesting, Mr. Ellis, because you said something. Men are not allowed to express certain emotions. Very interesting. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. We now have Dr. Mason online. Good morning, Dr. Mason. How are you?
Yes, morning. I'm quite well, Mr. Marshall. Morning again.
No, Doctor, we're looking at, as you know, we're looking at how real is domestic violence against men. And I, for example, took a look at some information that was published. And this is in relation to a study by the UWI gender study in the West Indies. It was published by a writer for the Gleaner, yes, Nadine Wilson Harris, from some time ago, September 8, 2016. And one of the captions here is an estimated 40% of Jamaican men are battered by their women. 40% are battered by their women and suffer in silence. And of course, I can't go through the entire article, but towards the end of the article, there is a bit here by an Anne-Marie Virgo, who she says from the Institute of Gender and Development Studies, Anne-Marie Virgo, UWI Mona, that's where she's from. She has also argued that men are abused physically, emotionally, and verbally by women based on a study she conducted last year at the time, which looked at male victims of domestic violence. And she's quoted here, I know that for one of the participants, his female partner burnt him with hot water. So that was like physical abuse. Full stop. Another one had a machete attack. And then you had others who had physical fighting. And then you had verbal abuse where the words would hurt some of them and would eventually lead to the emotional abuse. Unquote. Any comments, Dr. Mason?
Right. Yeah. So all of that seems kind of right on point. I must say I'm surprised at the 40%. It sounds high. And I having not read the article myself, I'm not sure how they kind of define abuse, but definitely abuse against men is a real issue. And as Blacker said earlier, that part of the problem is that we don't recognize it, which is why it's really good that you're talking about it this morning. And because we don't recognize it, there aren't all of these services or any services really available for males who find themselves or who are in these situations. So the abuse that Anne-Marie Virgo described from her study fits right in line with what we'd expect. Those are all forms of abuse that happen against whichever gender or whichever genders we're talking about. So all of what she's saying and all of what gender studies is saying from that article sounds kind of right on point, that these things do occur. The issue is that we're not recognizing it and we're not kind of studying it. I mean, it's interesting that you had to go back to 2016 to find any kind of reference. Right. So, it's not as easy to find documentation about it as it would be for when a female is victimized. So that's my initial reaction.
We're almost about to go to the break, but I'm interested to know what goes on in the minds of persons when they perpetrate this kind of abuse. Maybe you can at least start before we head into the break, Dr. Mason. What happens in the minds of persons, whether women or men, when they initiate this sort of abuse?
Right. So one thing I want to say, and I know we're going to pick it up after the break, is that because we haven't studied enough abuse against men, I am a little bit wary to lay one kind of theory that will apply for both males and females, right?
Well,
But
let's pick it apart.
okay,
All right. Here with us on the Morning Watch. Don't go anywhere.
This is Love 101 at 7:15.
Many of our brothers and sisters lose hope when diagnosed with HIV. Some lose their will to continue being a part of society. Others are despaired by the challenges of keeping up with their treatment. We understand. But remember, people with HIV live normal and progressive lives every day. You can too if you get back on track with your HIV treatment. Live for you, live for someone, live for something.
Get back on track, get back to life.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Have some issues and concerns in your community that you wish could be attended to now? Want a platform to voice those concerns? This could be the place for you. Send your 30-second voice notes describing your issue to 876-997-3125. That's 876-997-3125. Be sure to type a voice for hope before sending the voice note. Then listen on Tuesday at 9:45 a.m. for a voice for hope. Share the concerns you have seen. You know that street light that has not been working for a long time, or your community has not had water for 2 weeks now? Yes, here is somewhere you can share it. And maybe, just maybe, we can get some love on your situation. Remember now, send a 30-second voice note describing your issue and type a voice for hope before sending your voice note to 876-997-3125. A voice for hope. It's a problem, and we need a solution now. Love 101 FM, the family station, bringing a voice to your situation.
Yo, my G. You see my number? Well, duh. Nah, man, me just switch my number to Flow. And got 30 days of unlimited data to do everything, plus a free LTE SIM. 30 days unlimited everything? Yeah, man, plus there's more. After 30 days, I can activate any plan to continue enjoying unlimited YouTube, social, calls, and text to any network. We need all of that too. Yeah, you need to switch to Flow and keep your number. Visit your nearest Flow store today. Conditions apply.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. We are still in the main watch, and we're looking at how real is domestic violence against men. And our guest for this segment, Dr. Gillian Mason, community psychologist, lecturer in the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work, UWI Mona, and also Mr. Owen Blacker Ellis, gender justice activist. Just before the break, Dr. Mason, you were, as it were, looking at or considering or, opining on the possible causes of what gets into the mind of persons when they initiate this sort of domestic violence. But you were correctly pointing out, it seems, that because of the lack of studies, so to speak, in relation to women against men violence, you wouldn't really want to posit something that you don't have the foundation to do. But do you have any comments to make generally then? Because looking just before you actually came on the program, for example, Mr. Ellis was pointing out, or just about when you were about to come on the program, Mr. Ellis was pointing out that, men are not allowed to express certain emotions culturally, but women are. Do you see this as possibly factoring into what we are seeing happening, where women will lash out in certain situations and then the men are fearful of reporting it, or if they do have the bravery to do that, they get a sort of, they're ridiculed oftentimes when they go to make an official report anywhere. Any comments, Dr.
Right.
Mason?
Yes, definitely. So I was just being cautious and saying that we have to be careful and not just assume that it's the same for males and females. But in terms of as abusers, I think the issue that Black had raised earlier about our socialization is definitely very important. So one of the things that we have found is that perpetrators often have lived as children in households where abuse was occurring, right? And so they will learn. We have a theory, social learning theory, where persons will learn the behaviors of others, especially if they see that the behavior kind of rewards the person who is practicing it, right? So if you grow up in a household where you're one parent, since we're trying to really recognize the fact that the parent could be of either gender, one parent is abusing the other, and you see that it engenders a result where the abused partner is kind of subservient, they're obedient, and it kind of makes life easier for the abuser. Then as a child, you can say, so maybe this is something that I should do in order to get control, because that's really what abuse is about, right? To get control over the other person. And so that is one behavior or one experience that definitely research shows that it increases the likelihood. There, of course, is no guarantee. Blacker gave a very good example of his own upbringing. It doesn't mean that when Blacker gets up in his grows up in his own relationships, he's going to be abusive. It's not a guarantee, but it does increase the likelihood. So that is one issue. Another thing I also want to mention from when Blacker was describing his aunt, that again, there are abusers, you can imagine, is very, very complicated, and there are different types of abusers. So his aunt seemed to be, as he said, a very angry woman. So it didn't matter whether it was her partner, the police, he said, friends, whatever. This is somebody who is always in a fight. That's different from their persons who the only person they will abuse is this person who is really closest to them, their intimate partner, right? So there are different types of abuse, and it's important for us to recognize it. I do think that it can happen, again, whether the abuser is a male or a female, we are likely, I imagine, to find the same kind of variation in types of abusers.
Dr. Mason, before I bring back in Mr. Ellis, could you just quickly list for us, and I know it may not be a complete list, or it might be, but could you list for us some of the main types of abuse so listeners can sort of appreciate it?
Okay, so there are, I look at it in terms of three types. I kind of describe two. There's a person who has what we may call anger management issues. So they're always fighting, or they're always in a quarrel, and this is just their modus. This is just the way they operate, right? And with that person, you may want to, in terms of trying to help them, you have to deal with, and again, spoke about it with his aunt, that there's probably some underlying issues. And so her anger with the world just comes out in all of her relationships. Then there is the abuser who may not abuse their intimate partner frequently, but they still have laid the foundation where the partner feels controlled and therefore has to be very careful or watchful about what is happening in the relationship because an abusive incident may occur. And then we have the abuser, the kind of, if you want to think of it as a continuum, who is the intimate partner abuser, who is almost constantly abusing their partner, whether it be through emotional means or physical means, sexual abuse, economic, financial abuse, social abuse in terms of isolation, which is extremely popular and often starts to occur before the physical abuse. Emotional abuse and the social isolation often occurs before any actual physical harm is done to a partner. So those are kind of three types that I would highlight.
Mr. Ellis, any comments? Because we just heard Dr. Mason. It sounds like a mouthful, sir.
Dr. Mason raised a very important point there that I said to. That so I want to say that the issue is impatient of research and further conversation. Because one of my issues, when I was asked to come on the program, I reluctantly said yes, because I'm kind of wary of having this. Because I think it's important when we have this convo, timing. Who said that? So in the context now where, because very often I find that when we raise the issue of men being beaten by women, it's raised in the context of a response to the big issue of women being abused by men. And it's sometimes come across as deflecting and derailing. Because the clear and present danger right now is women and girls are being abused. So when we raise the issue of man get beaten too, it's like we're trying to hit back. And I'm very aware about that because the fact is, my observation says to me that the women who beat men beat anybody. But there are men who would never raise their hand against another man. Right, but there are men who are gentle, nice with their friends, and beat them women. And them just beat women. So gender-based violence is a particular issue that we're not. It really is hungry for more research and conversation. What's really involved here?
We will definitely be looking at the matter of the reverse in the second watch, but I know Dr. Mason will remain with us for the second watch in terms of men being the abusers of women. But thank you for your point, Mr. Ellis. Thank you indeed. We're about to wrap up for the main watch. Any final comments, Dr. Mason, and then we'll end with you, Mr. Ellis, in relation to how can a society, including church, what recommendations would you like to leave with us in terms of how to tackle cases where there is that sort of domestic violence where the woman is a perpetrator? Dr. Mason, then followed by Mr. Ellis.
Okay, so as we have been saying, that we need to recognize that this issue is a very real issue, and therefore we need to think about how can we support persons who are so victimized. Of course, we also need to think about how can we assist the perpetrator, right? But because the victim is kind of in this precarious situation, oftentimes we're going to be thinking more about what can we do to support the victimized person. And yes, of course, as you spoke, the church can play a really important role in this, regardless of the gender of the victim. And it is very important that persons, especially leaders in the church, are understand this phenomenon and really take the time to understand this phenomenon, because it's not fair to treat it like kind of like any other violence issue. The intimate nature of the relationship is so important. The dynamic that is created by this type of relationship makes it a much more complex situation to address. And so again, kudos to you for having this discussion. And I really do encourage the church and church leaders especially to spend more time understanding it, so that when their parishioners come to them, they can provide really supportive responses to them.
Indeed, Mr. Ellis.
Yes, so we need to create more spaces. And I mean, church, community, groups, in school, create more spaces where men are empowered to, allowed to, and are encouraged to speak about their feelings, about what it means to be a man. What are the things that are that men experience exclusively that makes them that make them worried, anxious, nervous, afraid, vulnerable? Because until we address, and then the reverse, so that, because I think if we get male accountability and get men to accept male culpability and male privilege, then we can then get to male victimhood, rather than appear as if they are competing with women for victimhood. Let's look at where we are wrong first, and then go from there into looking at male victimhood. So let's look at male privilege, male culpability, and then yes.
I'm sorry, you won't be staying with us for the second watch because we would like to look at what you mean by male privilege. Very interesting. Maybe Dr. Mason can comment. I want to thank Mr. Ellis and thank you. I want to thank you, Mr. Ellis and Dr. Mason, who will be Dr. Mason. You will be staying with us for the second watch. I want to thank both of you for the main watch. The morning watch continues. We'll take a look at our newspapers and, of course, our social media feedback question. Remember, is for what reason would you go back to the person who abuses you? Leave a comment on our Facebook or YouTube or Love 101 FM Jamaica Live, or WhatsApp comments and voice notes to 876-997-3125. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You know how Jamaican people do everything extra, right? So why should planning your retirement be any different? Introducing JNGI Silver Shield. 2-in-1 coverage for motor vehicle and home, including contents. See? Extra! Imagine 25% JN member discount, emergency roadside assistance, accident forgiveness up to $1 million and more. JNGI Silver Shield. Exclusively for members of the Caribbean community of retired persons. Visit jngi.com. JNGI. We'll help you find a way. A member of the JN Group.
JN Bank Live Online Banking is your quick and easy banking that's safe and secure. Sign up today. Visit jnbank.com. JN Bank will help you find a way. The time is
7:30 on the Family Station, Love 101.
This is current. This is news. This is what's happening in Jamaica and around the world. Current affairs, government activities, the latest news in education, health, the economy, and more. Stay up to date and stay current on Love 101, 6:30 a.m., our morning news. 10:30 a.m., our mid-morning updates. 1 p.m., highlights in the news inside the Alive Exchange. 5 p.m., Dateline News. 6:30 p.m., religious news highlights. And don't miss News Review with Clyde Edwards on Sundays at 7 p.m. This is current. This is news presented by Love 101 FM in partnership with My Jamaica Today. Only 3 clicks away. Stay in the know and in the now on Love 101, the family station.
Every Wednesday in the month of June, the morning news is sponsored by Lasco Panel. Switch back to Panel for fast, effective relief. And our mid-morning news is sponsored by Jamaica Customs Agency, Country Above Self.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. Let's take a look at the newspapers to see what Jamaicans and others are saying and doing. And we have in the Gleaner today a very concerning story. Southeast Regional Health Authority, SERA, probing controversial death of baby at Spanish Town Hospital. Many listeners by now would have likely heard about what happened to this young mother who lost her child under such, difficult circumstances. We have, now turning to the Jamaica Observer, sister of Highway 2000 crash victim, now on life support after deadly Hanover collision. Well, two very difficult stories to read there from both major daily newspapers. Coming up next, we'll read for you some of the feedback from our Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp question, which is, for what reason would you go back to the person who abuses you? If you haven't done so yet, leave a comment on our Facebook or YouTube, Love 101 FM Jamaica Live, or WhatsApp your comments and voice notes to 876-997-3125. We'll be right back.
Have some issues and concerns in your community that you wish could be attended to now? Want a platform to voice those concerns? This could be the place for you. Send your 30-second voice notes describing your issue to 876-997-3125. That's 876-997-3125. Be sure to type a voice for hope before sending the voice note. Then listen on Tuesday at 9:45 a.m. for a voice for hope. Share the concerns you have seen. You know that street light that has not been working for a long time, or your community has not had water for 2 weeks now? Yes, here's somewhere you can share it. And maybe, just maybe, we can get some love on your situation. Remember now, send a 30-second voice note describing your issue and type a voice for hope before sending your voice note to 876-997-3125. A voice for hope. It's a problem, and we need a solution now. Love 101 FM, the family station, bringing a voice to your situation.
Welcome back. You're tuning to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Stokely Marshall. Let's join Siobhan for a look at how our Facebook, YouTube, and WhatsApp friends answer today's question. For what reasons would you go back to the person who abuses you? Siobhan, any comment?
All right, comment here on WhatsApp. Nisia from Clarendon says, "No, you're crazy. I'm not ready to die. An abuser is always an abuser." Khaled says that's a crazy idea. Another comment here. This one says people return to the relationship because they are broken and fearful. So they return. Let me hear what this comment is saying. Yeah.
Forgiveness really matters right now in any domestic violence or situation or abusive situation. Forgiveness really matters, but I would be scared to go back thinking that person might abuse me again or I might abuse that person. It works both ways. Male abuse female, female abuse male. So I don't think I would love to go back. Reconciliation is good and forgiveness is good, but I would be scared. There will be something in the back of my mind or my head saying he's gonna do it again or I'm gonna do it again. So let's walk away and live happily ever after.
All right. This one says it makes no sense, and the follow up says they feel as if they have no choice, so they go back. I'll do this final one. Abuse. I would go back if he says he was sorry and really show, that he means it. Though I would be afraid. This one says, "Boy, but now go back. I don't understand why others do, but I understand why others do." All right, keep the conversation going, folks.
Wow, that's quite a mouthful, Shivani. And yes, indeed, keep the conversation going. We head right into the second watch. Now, you may have seen or heard the report about, for example, or various reports, because there have been so many, where there have been instances of domestic violence. The men badly beat women and do all sorts of, things to women which are, quite frankly, awful, terrible, disgusting, and really difficult to even repeat some of those things on radio. But oftentimes, for some reason, the women return to their abusers. And it happens not only in Jamaica, it happens actually all over the world. I spoke with someone just recently who indicated that in the developed country where they live, you'd be amazed at the kinds of reports of domestic violence where men really do horrible things to their women and or to the women who they live with. And, it cuts across all the races. It doesn't really matter the race or the color or the ethnicity of the man. It goes right across the cultures. So in a Jamaican Caribbean context, what are the causes here why, for example, a woman who has been badly beaten and battered by the man would return to him? And if the matter even goes to court, she goes and begs the judge for leniency against the man and that sort of thing. We have online, continuing from the first watch into the second watch, and we thank her for her time for being with us for both watches, Dr. Gillian Mason, community psychologist, a lecturer in the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work at the University of the West Indies, Mona. We also have online, now joining us, Christopher Kennedy. He is pastor of Joyland and Abrams Mennonite Churches. Good morning again, Dr. Mason, and good morning, Mr. Kennedy.
Good morning again. Morning, Reverend Kennedy.
Now, I'm going to start with you, Dr. Mason. Women who return to these very abusive relationships, as the topic says, why do women keep going back to the men who abuse them? As someone who specializes in your area as a community psychologist, what comments do you have to leave with us in terms, or to make in terms of what is in the mind of the female who goes back to that relationship? If that the man is so confident that she'll come back, he doesn't even think for a split second that she's really going to leave. Is that part of the reason why he continues to batter her like that? What is in this dynamic, Dr. Mason?
Okay, thanks. And you mentioned a key word there, dynamic, right? And so one of the things that I think we should start with. So, we have the term domestic violence and the term intimate partner violence. Domestic violence speaks to any kind of domestic relationship. Intimate partner violence is a subset of that and really speaks to violence between intimate partners. So that's what we're really focusing on today. And one of the things that we need to realize is that the relationship, of course, is more than the abuse, whatever form it comes in, that occurs in that relationship. So it is important for us to remember that the same person who is calling this their partner, some very nasty and demeaning names, or who is physically abusing them, is the same person who looks after them when they're sick. It's the same person who listens to them when they need to complain about their day or about something that is going on in their life. It's the same person who financially supports them. So this relationship is broader than the abuse, and this is something that we often forget or neglect. And we think, okay, because we see, especially with physical abuse, and as you said, some of the acts you wouldn't even want to repeat, that the physical assaults are so scary, and we're like, oh my God, I could never stay with somebody like that. But we need to recognize that this is larger than just the abuse. There are other aspects to the relationship, and the persons who are involved in that relationship know it, right? And so they can think of this person not as the person who is, slapping them across the face or, whatever they're doing, but they can remember the times when this person was so caring, when this person is such a good father or such a good mother, meaning they take care of the children and they're such good providers of all different types. So it's important to realize and remember the relationship is broader than the abuse. And this is one of the reasons why persons will return, because there are other aspects of the relationship that are important to them and that they treasure and that they want to continue. That's just one aspect, but I don't know if you want me to stop there. Pause there.
You can continue, Dr.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, very enlightening.
Right.
The name of the church from Dr. Kennedy. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's fine. So so that is one thing to remember. The second thing to remember, and some of your I was making notes of the comments in the WhatsApp, and there many of them I think were right on point, right? And again, there are varied angles and answers. So another thing to remember is that the dynamic. So as I said, that oftentimes when abuse starts, it starts out with the kind of emotional abuse, the social isolation, and social isolation is very important because that way the abuser is able to get the victimized, the abusee, to be dependent on them. And the more dependent you are on your abuser, then the harder it is going to be to leave, because where are you going to, right? Where are you going to go to? So if this person is able to isolate the victim from their family, from their friends, and the world is kind of surrounds just their very tight relationship, then again, it is harder for the person to leave, right? So that's another thing. One of your respondents talked about being fearful. So in building up this dynamic, the victim then becomes fearful. It's kind of like, if I leave, this person is going to kill me. And unfortunately, the data does support that one of the most dangerous times for a victim of abuse is when they are leaving the abuser, because here they are challenging the power and control that the abuser has. And of course, the abuser therefore feels threatened. And so this is why so often, exactly. So this is why so often we will have these stories where, it occurs when the person has left or is trying to leave. And this is not to discourage persons from leaving, of course. It just means that we have to be very planful and strategize to increase the chance of the abusee getting away and getting out of this relationship. Right. Yes.
We're almost up on a break, but Mr. Kennedy, any comments you want to make before we head into the break? Dr.
Yes, and I really appreciated what Dr. Gillian Mason was saying. As a minister, though, I do have incidents that I've faced where people are not in such a desperate state, but they just somehow seem to go back, and you wonder what is the reason. As a matter of fact, you have to be so careful.
I tell you what, Mr. Kennedy, hold those thoughts.
Go ahead.
Let's go to the break now.
Thank
you. Stay tuned with us, listeners. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
You're tuned to Love 101 at 7:45.
You know how Jamaican people do everything extra, right? So why should planning your retirement be any different? Introducing JNGI Silver Shield. 2-in-1 coverage for motor vehicle and home including contents. See? Extra! Imagine 25% JN member discount, emergency roadside assistance, accident forgiveness up to $1 million and more! JNGI Silver Shield. Exclusively for members of the Caribbean community of retired persons. Visit jngi.com. JNGI. We'll help you find a way. A member of the JN Group.
Many of our brothers and sisters lose hope when diagnosed with HIV. Some lose their will to continue being a part of society. Others are despaired by the challenges of keeping up with their treatment. We understand. But remember, people with HIV live normal and progressive lives every day. You can too if you get back on track with your HIV treatment. Live for you, live for someone, live for something.
Get back on track, get back to life.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Bills to pay and funds to transfer? No problem. I do it all on my time with JN Bank Live Online Banking. It's my simple and secure as that online banking.
Phone credit need a top up? No problem. I do it with JN Bank Live Online Banking.
It's quick and easy with just a few clicks. JN Bank Live, online banking that goes where you go. Sign up today. Visit jnbank.com. JN Bank, we'll help you find a way.
All right, a comment before we get back into the discussion from one of our listeners on the text line. Here we go.
I'd like to comment on what these gentlemen are saying. I was in a relationship for 29 years, worked together, build house, and so forth. And I had to leave 3 times, leaving 3 times, because I have no source of survival. I have to help myself. I go back for 3 times. When it reached to the point at the 4th times, he just wake up one morning and said something, tell him to cut off my head, and I leave. No, not how I'm going to survive, live with 2 children going to high school. He put out no effort to give them anything, and I fight, and I don't turn back, because God has helped me to escape that night when he said something, wake him up and tell him to cut off my head. So sometimes we don't know where we are going, we don't know how we will survive, but we just have to move.
Thank you for that, Shivani. Very important that we hear the comments of our listeners. And for those of you listeners who are just joining, we are in the second watch here on the Morning Watch. The topic is, why do women keep going back to the men who abuse them? Why do women keep going back to the men who abuse them? And our guest in this second watch, Dr. Gillian Mason, who was also with us in the first watch. She's a community psychologist, lecturer in the Department of Sociology, Psychology, and Social Work at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. And we also have online Christopher Kennedy. He is pastor of Joyland and Abrams Mennonite churches. Now, just before the break, Mr. Kennedy, you were beginning to make a comment. You seem to be indicating that not in every case the person returns because they are financially dependent. Would you like to continue, Mr. Kennedy? Pastor Kennedy?
Pastor Kennedy,
Dr.
you're on
Mason?
mute. On mute, please.
Dr. Mason?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. While we wait to get back,
Right.
he's probably
Oh,
Oh, yes, I'm here.
He's here.
Dr. Mason?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, Mr. Kennedy, you're back. Thank you. Okay, wonderful. Now, sir, you would like to continue the point you were making just before the break, that not in every case when someone returns is that they are financially dependent?
Yes, so that is another matter I, have I have deep interest in that. What is it that is going on?
Can I throw something in the ring, sir? Is it that maybe the woman has a soul tie to the man? I know it's not something that they would be studying at the UWI Center for Gender Studies. And I'm not to take away from anything you said, Dr. Mason, but speaking to the pastor here now, Mr. Kennedy, is it that maybe the woman has a soul tie to the man and she just feel like she can't leave him, to use to say it in a Jamaican way?
Well, in some instances, it might very well be that, but I don't know. It just seems to me that abuse, there's a cycle to it. Dr. Gillian really intimated this also when she talked about she emphasized the word dynamic when you said it, that there are really other features of a relationship that they might be so dominant. But then you ask yourself your question, many relationships are like that. They're multifaceted. Yes, the woman is cared for by the man. The woman is treating well. Her status has been lifted by the man, etc., etc. But she's able to walk away. So we have to look at what other facet of that dynamic is operating. And the people tend to feel dependent on others for many other reasons. I spoke to. Are you hearing me?
We're hearing you loud and clear, sir.
Yes. So.
Can I suggest something to you, sir, or ask a question? Is it that maybe this gentleman who she keeps returning to might have, for example, been the first person to make her feel better about herself? Are there some sort of self-esteem issues involved? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Yes.
Especially as a pastor, for example. Have you come to any of those conclusions?
Yes. I've felt that way so. I felt exactly like that, and you put it so well. Is this man the first person who might have made her feel like a genuine person, accepted? The first person to tell her that she is, because your family background is so crucial, and very often we're finding that young ladies, girls. I'm also a guidance counselor. I deal with young women, young girls, and they didn't grow up in an atmosphere with a family background where they were affirmed, as females, and they had a different view of how females are treated. And then this young man comes along, and he just lathers her with some of the best words she can hear, and it creates a bond, that even when that level of care and that level of kindness and that level of intimacy has fled the relationship, the impact is like bonding, that we talk about bonding and animals, swans would see, the chicks would see their mom the first time, and there's this bond, and they continue to follow the mom, and it just seems like sometimes human relationships reflect these sorts of operation. And so I'm willing to throw that into the mix,
I see. Dr. Mason? Yes. What the pastor said, and I said not let me put it in a more temporal way. I asked him about soul tie. Let me use a more temporal term. For example, is it that there is a bond between the woman, or does she have a bond to that man which is so powerful that she feels like there's a magnet that keeps pulling her back?
Right.
We know that there is a financial dependency sometimes, and all of that. We just heard a comment on through social media where the lady said she went back 3 times. She said something like that. But apart from those sorts of practical considerations, in your research, have you seen where maybe there's a kind of bond between herself and the gentleman which is so strong that she wants to return, even though, cognitively she should know that she can't return?
Yes. So again, as we said, this is a very complex issue, and there's a gamut of reasons why women or men will return to the abusive relationship. And so, yes, what Pastor Kennedy was saying in terms of there is that instance. Of course, we can find lots of situations where, having not gotten the nurturing as a child, finding a partner who's on, at least on the surface, or at least initially, is providing all of these self-esteem building support, And then this bond is formed. So when we're talking about a dynamic, there's a dynamic of the bond of the relationship, and then there's also the dynamic which Pastor Kennedy also spoke to in terms of getting into this cycle. For some people, there is this kind of cycle of violence. I just want to clarify one thing. When I said dependence earlier, I wasn't only speaking about financial dependence. There's also emotional, physical, all kinds of social dependence as well, right? And so all of that factors into it. But yes, there are going to be self-esteem issues. And one of the dynamics, or one of the part of the bonnet is formed, is that if a partner tears down with emotional abuse, what really happens is that you tear down the self-esteem, or it can happen, and often happens, where you tear down the self-esteem of your partner. That also helps to make them dependent on you. So you will hear women saying that, boy, the man will tell them, "You better glad for me because nobody is going to want you. Look how you're ugly. Look how you're this. Look how you're that," right? And so that helps to create within the minds of some women that this is my own. I have no choice. If I want a partner, it is him or nobody else. So I could go on about this topic forever, as you can imagine. But I do want to mention the voice note that was shared earlier, where the woman, and I thank her for sharing her experience, where it was at the point when the man threatened to cut off her head one night. And she was like, "I have no idea where I'm going to. I have no idea what I'm going to do with my children who are in high school, but I've got to get out." And so one of the things, is that, the person says he's sorry. Somebody spoke about that, and the women want to believe it because, of course, they want the good parts of the relationship to continue. And so it's very important. I just want to make two more points. I hope I have enough time. It's very important. One of your comments also said the abuser will always abuse. That will never change once they have the opportunity. Unfortunately, for the person who is being victimized, it may take a while for that to really sink in. That no matter what I do, I say one of your comments from Facebook, the person is talking about having left 3 times their baby father and going back, because every time they were hoping that this time, he would be able to control himself. He won't behave like this anymore. And it is only after experiencing it, for many women, it's only after experiencing it repeatedly and they finally do realize that this man is not going to change. And the only thing I can do is get out of this relationship. One last point, I know I'm trying to think, is that the issue of forgiveness, which again, forgiveness was mentioned by one of your commentators, and I know it was also mentioned in that incident from Trelawney, right, where the woman talked about forgiving the man. And one of the things, I am not an expert on the topic of forgiveness, meaning the theory of it. But one of the things I think people need to realize is that forgiveness doesn't mean that you have to return, right? You can always be apart from the person, because the women who do leave their abusers, they still have to be able to forgive them in order to go on with their lives. So forgiveness, to me, is not equivalent to returning. You can deal with the whole forgiveness issue on your own without necessarily returning. I will pause because I know I'm dominating it.
No, totally understand, Dr. Mason, and Mr. Kennedy. We'll give it the last word because we're almost out of time. Any final thoughts you want to leave with us? That we've heard all of what Dr. Mason said.
Yes.
Final thoughts you want to leave with us, because
so one person that
we want to save more women from going through this. Any final thoughts?
Yeah. So one person was very, very strong, a very, very strong woman who left. She reminisced with me one day, and she said, "This husband of hers, he would defend you to the ground. If anybody troubles you, he was ignited." And she said she never met somebody who would draw her to him in that way. And he would take over the issue, and he would represent her. He would put himself in front of her. And she said that is the thing about him that she loved so much. And yet he's a womanizer, was so terrible. He never showed her the kind of love that she showed. But there's something, as Dr. Gillian Nelson said, that in this dynamic stands out and is tremendously impacted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we here on the Morning Watch will do all we will do all we can to stop the abuse of women by men, women and girls by men, because this cycle of abuse has to end. I want to thank you, Dr. Mason and Pastor Kennedy, for being with us this morning. Thank you, our listeners, for being with us. Join us again tomorrow for political and controversial issues. And for information on how to get copies of this program, call our production department at 876-968-9596-7. The Morning Watch is on our Love 101 app. Download it today and stay connected to the family station, Love 101 FM. This has been The Morning Watch. Thanks to our producer, Kathy Gale, and to our guest. I am Stokely Marshall, handing it back to Love in the morning with Siobhan Blair.
You're tuned to Love 101. The family station is now 8 o'clock. They are between